Well, I knew that the countless years that I've put into mastering pacifism in Diablo 2 would eventually have some type of results, but I didn't expect it to be because they changed next hit delay. So what I have for you right here is the double Nova Sorceress. And you might be asking yourself, what does that mean? Well, let me just go ahead and show you. I'm going to teleport into a big old pack of cows. These cows are currently on players 3 difficulty. Keep that in mind, we're in hell. I'm going to do nothing but hold down right click on static and just kind of watch what happens. Here we go. Here are all the cows. We jump right into the middle of them. Nothing up my sleeves. You know what? No hands on the keyboard or mouse. This is the double Nova Sorceress. And with all the changes that came in from patch 2.7 and next hit delay, the community realized something very simple, and it was that Nova really didn't benefit from the changes at all, except in multiplayer scenarios where previously you were losing more damage because other people with next hit delay skills were hitting them some of the time. But there was no way to beat the next hit delay timer on Nova Sorceress because even at the 200 FCR breakpoint, nothing is different. You can't cast faster than the next hit delay allows. So I'm going to have timestamps down to everything below. We'll go over the gear, my stats, my skills, the mercenary that we pick. I'm going to try to explain the mechanism that we're basically getting ahead of a base Nova Sorceress, and then just show you a bunch of gameplay where this thing absolutely crushes players 8 difficulty, just like a regular Nova Sorceress would. And to be honest with you, when I started off this video and what I wanted to test, it was just to see whether or not my Pacifist Sorceress, who uses chance to cast Nova when struck, would be stronger than it was previously, and it turns out it was. It was pretty decent, because you can reach greater than 100% chance to cast Nova when struck if you have that affix on a bunch of different pieces of gear. That meant that every single time a monster hit you, you would cast a level 5 Nova. So if you threw on all of the synergies and you made sure that it was like an energy shield build, you could run around and trigger a ton of Novas, and that's what you just saw with the cows. Now here's the best part. Since each trigger of the skill from our gear counts as its own cast, that means that if 5 monsters hit you simultaneously, 5 Novas go out. And since they made next hit delay only apply to a single cast of a skill as opposed to the skill in general, all 5 Novas can now hit the target simultaneously. Now on players 1 to 3, as you just noticed, a level 5 Nova does decent damage. On players 1, you can actually just sit there and do absolutely nothing at all, completely go AFK, and every monster that triggers hitting you will eventually die to the Nova procs, and it's pretty fast. But that wasn't good enough for me. I wanted to ask the question, what if you played a Nova Sorceress where you also wore 100% chance to cast Nova when struck? And the damage on the skill isn't the important part, although it's pretty decent. It's how the game interacts with monster regeneration and overall ability to output damage per frame, where this build really starts to shine. So first things first for the gear. This is single player, this is hero edited. I built out a perfect carrier. Your mileage is absolutely going to vary if you try to set this up, but I know that other people who love the Nova Sorceress, especially the self-wheeled Infinity Nova Sorceress, are already really excited to try this out because in a lot of circumstances, it actually is slightly faster than a similar Nova Sorceress at a similar FCR breakpoint, since we're at the 63 FCR breakpoint. But just for the gear, we're using Infinity, we're using a Griffins with a facet, and then the rest of the gear is where it gets kind of interesting. Every other piece is a crafted piece of gear. These are all caster crafted for us to get the biggest amounts of mana, regenerate mana, and maximum mana, as well as mana per kill that are available on gear that can roll with chance to cast Nova when struck. And just remember, you do need Nova on every other piece of gear that you're wearing to reach 98% chance to cast Nova when struck, which for all intents and purposes is 100%. And then the rest of the stats that you can get on the gear is actually kind of interesting for how it can shore up issues with your resistances, faster cast rate, magic find, etc. So caster crafted gauntlets with Nova Windstruck, mana, regen mana, lightning res, mana per kill, and magic find. We went with a safety breastplate to be able to get that damage reduction, which is really nice on an energy shield sorceress, but this could also be a caster crafted. It can actually be any of the crafted armors, depending on what look you're going for. They all have valuable stats on them that would let you move stats around on other gear pieces. But again, chance to cast Nova Windstruck, 2 sockets to be able to put facets into it, additional mana, and then poison length reduction, which is really important on an energy shield Nova Sorceress. Typically, we are using Cure on our Mercenary, so it's a little bit less important, but this at least gets us pretty close to the 0% poison length reduction, meaning that poison is only applying for its normal length of time as opposed to double its rate. Same ring on both sides. These are caster crafted for the FCR, energy, mana, regen mana, and then we go with all res and Nova when struck on both of them. A caster crafted belt, this should be a crafted belt color as opposed to the rare belt color, but sue me, I didn't do it perfectly in the hero editor. Nova Windstruck, mana, additional tri-res across the board. Obviously here you could also put faster hit recovery if you didn't want to have it down in your charms, but I think tri-res is probably the best option here. Booties, run walk, mana, lightning res, Nova Windstruck, and then this amulet, which is absolutely disgusting. 2 to sorceress skills, the FCR from the caster craft, 110 mana, regen mana, all res, and then Nova Windstruck. On our swap, we're just using Call to Arms and a Spirit, pretty par for the course. Really important for our energy shield sorceress to get closer to that 3k mana range that I would like to be at. And then across the charms, this actually isn't even optimal. They are ridiculous. Do not get it twisted. All of this gear is ridiculous, but they're not even truly optimal. I would actually like to swap over a couple of these charms to magic find as opposed to life, since life is less important since we're on an energy shield build. But Torch, Annie, we have life lightning skillers and then hit recovery lightning skillers to be at the 43 faster hit recovery breakpoint. Then a Geeds and a Crack of the Heavens with life and all res across the top in the small charms. We are using a memory staff for the energy shield pre-buff. It's not super important, but it saves us a couple extra points that can then be put into Thunderstorm for slightly better single target damage output, although that's not super important. It's just kind of nice to have another kind of passive option for damage on the build. For the skilled tree, we're maxing out Static Field, Nova, and Lightning Mastery. We are maxing out Telekinesis as a synergy, and then enough points into energy shield so that with memory staff and call to arms we're at the 95% absorption rate, which is the highest that you can get on energy shield, and additional points are really not important in any way, shape, or form. And then dump points are going into Thunderstorm. We do pick up 1 point into warmth for that extra little bit of mana recovery. It's a lot less important if you're using an Insight Mercenary, but every bit helps. And then surprisingly, you don't even really want to pick up frozen armor here. Frozen armor is going to apply chill length to monsters in hell, and that's going to decrease the rate at which they attack you. And the rate at which they attack you is how quickly you can output additional Novas while you yourself are casting Static Field or Nova. So we actually want to be getting hit as often as possible. That's why you'll also notice that none of my bases are really upgraded, because I want to have as little defense as possible, because I want to get hit as often as possible. You see the theme that we're going with here. For the Mercenary, we're using a Prayer Mercenary so that we can get the triple dip of prayer from the Meditation Aura as well as the Cleansing Aura. Cure here basically solves all of our poison problems that you would normally have on an energy shield sorceress, as well as giving us additional healing from the prayer, and that's also giving him additional healing from the prayer as well. We're using Insight Cryptic Axe for the Meditation Aura for the double dip on the prayer, and also for the huge amount of mana regen for our energy shield consumption. And then we're going with Chains of Honor. Now you might be asking, why not Fortitude here? Well, the +2 to skills from Chains of Honor not only increases his prayer level for the base aura that he has, but it also increases the synergy bonus both on Cure and Meditation, since all of these auras on the Paladin actually benefit from soft points to prayer, whereas most other skills only benefit from hard points as a synergy. It's just an interesting thing with Cleansing, Meditation Aura, and Prayer that the Paladin has going for it. Then for our stats, we put just enough strength in to be able to use a Monarch on swap for the strength requirement, and then everything else down into energy. You'll see that we have near max cap res across the board. We could actually cap out our poison res as well if we swapped over to a couple poison small charms as opposed to the all res charms that we have. And with bow and battle command up, let me just show you that really quickly. We have 873 life and perfect 2700 mana. So again, let's just bump this up to players 8, and we'll just kind of do a full clear on Chaos Sanctuary as we go, so you can get an idea of how this build typically performs. Oh, we have a bunch of people right here. Jump in, static, casting Nova. Every once in a while they attack us as well. We get some free Novas. That's kind of what happens here. But let's start talking about monsters regenerating. Just about every monster in the game has a base regeneration rate. And the way that regeneration works is that every frame, so every 1/25th of a second where a monster is not actively taking damage, they are regenerating. And how much they regenerate is based off of their regeneration rate, which is a value that they have in their mon stats table. And then in addition to that, how much life that they have. So on higher player settings, monsters are going to regenerate at a higher rate than they typically would because they have higher life at this point. And if every frame a monster is regenerating to some amount while they are not actively taking damage, the only way to typically handle that are from 3 different options. 1, doing damage on every single frame. So if you had an attack that somehow dealt damage on every single frame, then you would effectively completely negate their regeneration. Some ways around this that you might know from fighting the Ubers or dealing with high-level bosses is open wounds. Open wounds applies a negative regeneration rate to the monster, meaning that instead of regenerating, they are losing life on every frame, as opposed to what they normally would do. And this is how you typically get around like the Ubers and stopping their regeneration. Another way of getting over monster regeneration rate is applying poison damage, since poison damage is also applied as negative monster regen on every frame where they would be regenerating. Instead, they are taking poison damage. So in these 3 cases, you are not actually regenerating on the monster and you're getting quote unquote maximum damage output from your skills. Now, Nova does a ton of damage and it's really powerful, but it doesn't do damage on every single frame. It's just not able to do so. At 200 FCR, the fastest that a sorceress can actually put out damage is every 7 frames, meaning that in between that, there are 6 frames where the monster is actively regenerating. The reason why this double Nova Sorceress actually gets better damage output than your typical Nova Sorceress is because you are interrupting their regen on every frame where that extra Nova is spiking out from your character. And as you can see, monsters hitting us multiple times are triggering multiple Novas, meaning that there are less and less spaces in between for them to be regenerating. This is why builds that use really slow attacks feel so much worse than their counterparts would. Even if you're putting out a ton of damage per attack, if you only hit once every 10 frames, once every 15 frames, use something like leap attack, where you can only hit once every second, the amount of time that the monster regenerates is getting larger and larger and larger, meaning that your effective damage output is much lower than an attack that applies more regularly. This is why Zeal Paladins and Dragon Talon Assassins feel so good. You're applying damage over such short periods of time that the monster is regenerating a very small amount while you're dealing damage. It's why Poison typically feels really good as well. While other attacks will interrupt your poison damage because it stops monster regen, and negative regen is the same as positive regen, every frame they're taking damage, the monsters are regenerating 0% of the time. Now, this doesn't apply in situations like this Diablo right here, where they actually cannot regenerate. You're just getting the base amount of damage output possible, but this is a 63 FCR Nova Sorceress using an infinity with max synergies and max skillers. Your regular damage output is already massive. Where we're gaining better output is in every scenario where the monster can regenerate at all. So in conclusion, that's the double Nova Sorceress. It's a sorceress that casts Nova even when she isn't casting Nova, and then when she does cast the Nova, she casts double the Novas. I'm really happy with the fact that this thing A, does anything at all, B, is actually a pretty decent pacifist build if you do nothing else, and then C, once you actually build it out with a proper mercenary and actually using infinity and attacking yourself, we are somehow generating a better output than you would have expected. And I think it's for a lot of reasons that players just can't really see. This monster regen life problem is something that goes under the radar so often and is really hard to calculate, but seeing is believing. The output here is ridiculous. The survivability is great because you have more monsters and hit recovery more often. Against players 1, you literally don't need to do anything. Even on players 3, other than drinking potions, all I need to do is static. And then once you want to bump it up to players 8, it does it. Now, the gear itself is ridiculous. Do not get it twisted. You would have to supplement with better, more foundational pieces of unique, set, or better rare gear until you have the exact pieces that I showed here. But every single piece that you add onto it just increases your efficiency that much. I would love to hear from you all. I think that there are some ways where you only run maybe 50% chance to cast Nova, and then you can actually still hit the 105 FCR breakpoint, get more facets on the build, etc. But I'd love to see what you all make of this and what you think of it. Please let me know down in the comments if you have some better ideas or you think that the gear could be changed. Also hit me up in the Discord. A ton of people have been coming in recently, and I super appreciate it because the more nerds that we get down in there theory crafting, the better we all get at the game. So if you haven't joined the Discord, the link is in the description down below. Please consider coming joining. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, consider leaving a comment, liking, and subscribing to the channel as well. We're trying to make a huge push as D4 is eventually going to get released. We're going to be cracking into that game with the same amount of over nerdery that we've been applying to Diablo 2 Resurrected. So if you've appreciated my content here, it's only going to get better there. But again, thank you for watching. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.